If you're American in the living room, what are you in the bathroom? European. And I want my camera to be in focus because it would really suck to film this whole thing and find out I was out of focus the whole time.
Most of this video I am out of focus, and I am so sorry. I am not accustomed to shooting in manual focus, and I screwed up. So, enjoy that.
Alright, what is going on, everybody? We are here with the second video on the Papa Yaga channel. I'm very excited. We're going to be going over the SCP-002 today. Now, the reason we're doing 002 before 001 is a little complicated. For those who are actually watching this channel and really are not familiar with SCP content or have not really spent much time reading them, the 001s are a little bit different. Yes, I said 001s. There are multiple, by like, I think over 20. Basically, the number 001 is kind of an important and prestigious designation, and so what they've done from the beginning with the SCP Foundation is essentially people write what they're called proposals for SCP-001. Nobody knows what the real SCP-001 is because in universe, all of the proposals for SCP-001 are fake except one, and nobody knows which one it is. I suggest you go and actually read the article yourself before listening to my video about it because it's going to be a little bit paraphrased. The actual facts of the SCP, which is the SCPs are very dryly written, and they basically present facts. I'm going to be reading, like word for word, a lot of that because it makes a lot more sense in that context to just read it, because they don't really spend a lot of time giving you unnecessary information that you can paraphrase. You're losing stuff if I cut stuff out. So I will be reading the SCPs for the most part, but often SCPs have something called like an adventure log or something like that. I don't think that's the right term, but basically sometimes SCPs are, say, a large, like I mentioned in the introduction video, there's the IKEA one. And there's a large log of somebody who was trapped in the IKEA, and like they basically wrote down their experiences in there. That sort of thing I'm going to paraphrase for the channel because that's more like a story, and that's something that I would want to be actually read. Like I would want you to actually go and read that yourself. There are also just separate articles called tales, like SCP, like Foundation Tales or whatever, often that are linked with specific SCPs or specific places in the world. They basically flesh out more of the world and what the SCP Foundation and that universe is like. So when I read those are also probably going to be paraphrased for the most part. And also to make SCP readings on this channel a little bit different from actually reading the SCP yourself, which I do suggest doing. Please go and do because they're really interesting. I'm going to be reading the description of each SCP before I actually go into the containment procedures, because how they're written is the containment procedures are portrayed before and then they have the description of the SCP afterward. And that's intentional, and it makes it for an interesting, because when you're reading the actual containment procedures, like how they're containing this SCP, you don't really know what the SCP is. But for the sake of this channel and to make things a little bit different, I'm going to be actually reading the descriptions first. SCP-002, otherwise known as the Living Room. Object Class, Euclid. Description: SCP-002 resembles a tumorous, fleshy growth, with a volume of roughly 60 meters cubed, or 2,000 feet cubed. An iron valve hatch on one side leads to its interior, which appears to be a standard, low-rent apartment of modest size. One wall of the room possesses a single window, though no such opening is visible from the exterior. The room contains furniture which, upon close examination, appears to be sculpted bone, woven hair, and various other biological substances produced by the human body. All matter tested thus far show independent or fragmented DNA sequences for each object in the room. Reference: to date, subject has been responsible for the disappearances of 7 personnel. It has also, in its time at the facility, further furnished itself with 2 lamps, a throw rug, a television, a radio, a beanbag chair, 3 books in an unknown language, 4 children's toys, and a small potted plant. Tests with a variety of lab animals, including higher primates, have failed to provoke a response in SCP-002. Cadavers, as well, failed to produce any effect. Whatever process the subject uses to convert organic matter into furnishings is apparently only facilitated by the introduction of living humans. Refer to the Mulhausen report for details related to the object's discovery. Mulhausen report. The following is a brief report detailing the discovery of SCP-002. Subject was discovered in a small crater in northern Portugal, where it struck the Earth from orbit. Encased in a shell of thick rock, the fleshy exterior of the object was exposed by the impact. A native farmer happened upon the site and reported his findings to the village elder. Subject gained SCP attention when a Level 4 agent posted in the area detected a small radioactive anomaly generated by the object. A collection squad of SCP security personnel, led by General Mulhausen, was immediately dispatched to the area where they quickly secured the subject in a large container and performed initial testing with subjects recruited from the nearby village. 3 men individually sent into the structure subsequently disappeared. Upon discovering this deadly property of the subject, General Mulhausen issued a Level 4A termination order of any witnesses, roughly 1/3 of the village, to ensure no outside knowledge of the object, and initiated its transport to SCP facility, data expunged. This dude. The SCP Foundation has amnestics. There's something that essentially erase someone's short-term memory of, like, I don't know. They basically make you forget, and they liberally use amnestics throughout. You'll constantly hear of them using amnestics, and for some reason, General Mulhausen decided to just kill 1/3 of the village. He killed 1/3 of the village. I don't know why, because killing's more fun. That's my only guess. He just really was feeling it that day. I don't know if somehow they didn't have amnestics on hand and they were worried about some people leaving and getting that information out to somebody or telling more people, but it's insane to me that he actually just killed 1/3 of the village. During preparation for transport, 4 SCP security personnel were inexplicably drawn inside the object, where they, too, immediately disappeared. Following inspection, it appeared as if the object had grown several new furnishings, and was beginning to look like the interior of an apartment room. General Mulhausen immediately ordered the requisition of several Class 3 hazmat suits for the remaining security team members, who proceeded to lift the container onto a waiting freight ship for transport to the SCP containment facility. There's another paragraph after this, but I don't want to read it because it's kind of a spoiler, because a tale was written later about this SCP, about its time, the SCP's time on the freight ship, and a breach of containment on the freight ship. It's kind of insane, and I'm going to read my paraphrase writing of that before I read this last paragraph. A Foundation containment specialist by the name of Dr. Tyler Palma was ordered into the field, staying with 002 until it made it into the facility in France, where it would be contained and protected. He was given very little information about everything and is rather disgruntled by the whole ordeal. He'd read the reports of the 7 deaths up to this point and deeply regarded them as a senseless loss of life. During 002's time at sea, Dr. Mulhausen was conducting further experiments on it using D-Class personnel. D-Class personnel essentially means disposable. They are basically pulled from like prison systems and stuff like that and used in experiments in the Foundation. The Foundation isn't altogether good, if you haven't noticed yet. On one occasion, Mulhausen demonstrates the properties of 002 to the new personnel, including Dr. Palma. He does this by ordering a D-Class personnel to step closer to 002, and then orders him to step away. The man refuses to step away, and then begins weeping, and then wailing, and then incomprehensibly shouting as he inches, then strides, then runs towards SCP-002, and then enters its depths. He's never seen again. Dr. Palma is furious at this loss of life, as they're already aware of SCP-002's anomalous properties, but General Mulhausen is adamant that this is his project, and Dr. Palma should know his place. The 4 Foundation personnel who had been inexplicably drawn into 002 before had been labeled as unreported deaths, and Palma inquires angrily about them, saying, "We don't know anything about it, and you're just feeding it bodies. You can't do that." To which Mulhausen basically just says, "I can do what I want," and orders Palma out of his face. Later, Dr. Palma is replaying the recording of the incident with the D-Class personnel, and he begins to pick out the word home being repeated between the man's incoherent shoutings. Later that night, Dr. Palma is eating with his friend Rob and discussing the things going wrong with that operation when the ship's klaxon starts sounding. They exit the dining hall and run up to the deck. Suddenly, Rob's entire demeanor changes from panicking to calm, and he starts saying how he wants to go home, that he is going to go home now. Then Dr. Palma notices the unmistakable outline of a shape behind them against the horizon. Dr. Palma goes to grab Rob and escape, but then he sees Rob sprint past him towards 002, crying and shouting about his daughter and how he's going to come home to her. And then the yelling stops. Dr. Palma sprints away from the fleshy orb toward the bridge, makes it inside, and slams the heavy door behind him. There, he finds General Mulhausen, standing over a dead navigating officer, gun in hand. He tells Dr. Palma that the gun is only for those who disagree with him, and then he tells Dr. Palmer to watch him. Soon after, junior researcher Santos bursts through the bridge door as well, screaming about 002. Mulhausen calmly orders Santos to turn around and look at the orb, telling him that there's nothing bad here, and that they've decided to let him go home. That they've gone so far as to bring his home all the way here for him. He also asks Santos to find junior researcher Torres and take her home as well. Santos, mesmerized and now very calm, acquiesces and lumbers off into the night. Mulhausen then orders Dr. Palma to look at the orb. Dr. Palma then realizes that this is no longer General Mulhausen, but rather a shell filled with the wishes of that black tumor. He sprints toward the door, trying to escape General Mulhausen, when it grabs his legs and continues screaming that he look at the orb. He kicks free and sprints out the door, away from the orb without looking at it. Seeking his own room to hide in, he passes several husks, who all try to stop him, before he stops short in a hallway. The monster is in the hallway before him, squeezed into every corner, tentacles grasping whatever they can. Dr. Palma turns to run, but trips over an electrical cord. When he gets up, he sees the monster again. But wait, it's not a monster at all. It's actually his home. The house he grew up in with his family. And he knows they're inside, waiting for him. So Dr. Palma goes home, which is exactly how he remembers it. And he encounters his family. They all want a big hug. But before he's fully enveloped by 002, something of a shadow flickers over the vision, distorting everything in horrifying ways. Then, Dr. Palma remembers that his family is actually shattered, and they no longer own this home. He remembers what his home is now. The Foundation. Where his new friends are. Where he explores the unknown every single day. Then, the vision fades, and he's standing in an apartment with meaty walls, and furniture that appears to be made from biological substances produced by humans. He begins to notice faces, Dr. Torres's, Rob's. The room begins to close in on him, trying to keep him there. He hears Rob's and Dr. Santos's voices crying out, and Dr. Palma runs out the door. He trips again over the same electrical cord, but then has an idea. The abomination is crawling toward him, and he pulls on the cord until it breaks loose, then thrusts the electrical wires into the mouth of the beast. The orb instantly begins screeching and compressing in on itself as it speeds down the hallway away from Dr. Palma. It disappears from sight, and Dr. Palma hides in his room's closet. The final 3 paragraphs read, "Hours later, the door was broken open with a bang. Armed Foundation guards spilled into the room, opening the closet and revealing Dr. Palma. They kept their sights on its sole occupant at all times. Dr. Palma obliged. These men didn't have the same gear as the boat's team did, which meant the Foundation had found the ship. They were saving him. He may have had 6 guns aimed at him, but for the first time since he had gotten on the boat, he felt safe. He felt at home. And that's it for the tale. I'm going to get back into the SCP. Following the termination of General Mulhausen, SCP-002 was resecured by SCP staff and brought into special containment in Classified, where it currently resides. Staff with clearance below Level 3 have been denied access to the SCP-002 container without prior approval of at least 2 Level 4 staff after the Mulhausen incident. Now I'm going to be reading the special containment procedures for SCP-002 where it's being held. SCP-002 is to remain connected to a suitable power supply at all times, to keep it in what appears to be a recharging mode. In case of electrical outage, the emergency barrier between the object and the facility is to be closed and the immediate area evacuated. Once facility power is re-established, alternating bursts of X-ray and ultraviolet light must strobe the area until SCP-002 is re-affixed to the power supply and returned to recharging mode. Containment area is to be kept at negative air pressure at all times. Teams, including a minimum of 2 members, are required within 20 meters of SCP-002 or its containment area. Personnel should maintain physical contact with one another at all times to confirm there is another person present, as perception may be dulled, skewed, or influenced by proximity to the object. No personnel below Level 3 are permitted within SCP-002. This requirement may be waived via written authorization form from 2 off-site Level 4 administrators. Command staff issued such a waiver must be escorted by at least 5 Level 3 security personnel for the duration of their contact, and must temporarily surrender their rank and security clearance. Following contact, command staff will be escorted at least 5 kilometers from SCP-002 to undergo a 72-hour quarantine and psychological evaluation. If deemed fit for return to duty by psych staff, rank and security clearance may be restored when quarantine expires. So yeah, that's SCP-002. Really tapping into that horror aspect, especially with the tale. Living room. Haha, funny. Ha, what a funny take on a living room. Pretty high up there on the disgusting scale, with room made of human meat and furniture made of human everything else. Not the place I'd say I'd like to live, but I'm sure some people are down for that. So yeah, the Foundation kind of gets into some really sketchy situations at times. I am glad that Mulhausen is kind of out of the picture now. Well, fully out of the picture now. Because obviously he was a little bit too extreme in his methods. I think there needs to be some modicum of restraint in order to be in charge of something like that, because he was just kind of throwing peoples to their deaths willy-nilly. I also find it very interesting that this thing supposedly came from space and is able to just assimilate with people and create things from flesh, which you would think it had never encountered before, and it seems perfectly suited for something like this. It's strange in general. It really makes you question how this thing came to be in the first place. So that was SCP-002 by an unknown author on the SCP Wiki. And the tale, the Mulhausen incident, was written by, let me get this right, Dr. Dromaeus. And I appreciate it if you made it through this whole video. Thanks for sticking around, and thanks for listening to me tell some crazy stories. I have a lot more I want to do, and a lot more other topics other than SCP. It's going to be really interesting, because I don't have enough time to just do it all. So, I'm gonna live time, and maybe eventually, somehow, some way, I'm able to do this full-time or even part-time. That'd be awesome, because I just have so much I want to do, not enough time to do it. So, it's really fun so far. I'm really enjoying it. I'm really enjoying getting to some editing again. I've not been doing a lot of personal editing for a while, so this has been a nice project, and I appreciate every one of you who watched this, and I think that's about it. I don't know if I have anything else to say about this, but I'm looking forward to the future, and I hope each and every one of you has a wonderful day, and see you later. I'm certain you can hear that, and that is so unfortunate, because I'm actually shutting this door because I don't want to hear my cat scratching at their litter box. A Foundation containment specialist by the name of Dr. And Palma inquires is the word, Nathan. Get your head in the game. To which Mulhausen basically just says, I can do what I want, and orders Mulhausen. What? He's ordering himself! Trying to escape General Mulhausen when he... That's so funny. Gotta stay hydrated when we're talking a whole lot. Whew. R/Hydro homies.